Thank you everyone for attending the first Science Cafe today. So before we get started, we just wanted to give a brief introduction into the Clinical and Translational Science Collaborative for those that are not familiar. And so the principal investigator, Dr. Grace McCumsey, is here today to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McCumsey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Switkowski. I'm the Executive Director of the CTSC. Welcome to our first Science Cafe.
So very quickly, I know most of you know the CTSC, but since this is the first Science Cafe, just a 2-minute overview of the CTSC. So what we do is disease agnostic. We're here to enhance the efficiency of clinical and translational research. We're here to make sure that we use every disease as a model to improve translational research and clinical research. Next slide. So we have been here for a long time, since the start of NCATS. I think it was 2007. We're one of about 60, actually. I think now there are 56, but let's say about 60 from nationally, from all of the academic centers in the U.S. And we have a lot of goals. You look at this, it looks pretty wide, but I'll get back to our goals. If you go next slide. So as I mentioned, we've been here, and I wanted to point out that in 2023, we started a new cycle. We were awarded in August 23, and this one was in the form of a UM1. It came with $56.3 million. It's the largest grant in the history of CASE. It's a 7-year grant, and in addition to the UM1, there were several training grants, RC2, which are very innovative programs. So that's in addition to the UM1. So all of us work together to improve training, to improve research, and so on. Next slide. So the one thing that came with this new cycle, very different than prior, is a shift in focus. So whereas T1, T2 were always kind of the CTSC model, is to be the ones moving research from the lab to humans, so very early research. Now it moved to the right, which is a change in focus. Now, what we did in the application is to center it around improving not just research overall, but improving health inequities in our area. And that really resonated with the reviewers and with NIH. And the way we put it is that, you know, our area is a living lab of health inequities. As you see on the slide, even 2 neighborhoods in the same county, Cuyahoga County, they're only a couple miles apart. They have 23-year difference in life expectancy. So we really kind of focused on that in our entire application. Next slide. So the priorities this time, I don't want you to read every word, but know that it is a lot of community engagement, integrating the community partners at all stages of the research process. We are trying to also improve enrollment of underrepresented groups in research. We had made before this, as a CTSA, we had made some improvements for some of the groups and others none. So this is a big goal for this application. And of course, disseminating and implementing the findings, because a lot of findings from the clinical trials never make it to clinicians and never make it to the community. So dissemination and implementation is one big focus. in addition to educational and training programs. Next slide. So we do a lot. We have pretty, wide focus. I want to attract your attention to this education and training. So beside the definite training grant, some for pre-doc, some for postdoctoral trainees, we are working on several programs like the one you're participating in now, Science Cafe, which I'll come back to it. But Atlas is, for example, a leadership training to grow leaders in team science. That's something new that we're going to start in the next month or two. We have different sessions at different programs. We're thinking about, we want to bring all the partners together. We have 6 partners, including 2 new partners, NeoMed and Toledo. And then in addition to the 6 partners, of course, the leader is CASE. So it's a lot of institutions that clinically, some of them are very, competitive, but we want to all work together and continue to work together on improving research and the health of our community. And part of it is a lot of education for community, as well as for investigators in the academic centers. We have a lot of resources. Next slide. There's a Spark system. It's kind of the door to get any service or any consultation from the CTSC. So I would urge you, if you haven't done yet, go to spark.case.edu, and you see a evolving and increasing number of resources that we offer. For example, we recently added clinicaltrials.gov, a nightmare website that the government forced us to use for compliance. You can get help with somebody helping you to be compliant and so on. There are a lot of different services, so please check it out. And then the last thing I'm going to say before introducing Dr. Rao, next slide, is the best way to learn about the CTSC is to become a member. So you can actually use this QR code, go to our website, and become a member, because this is how you get a lot of opportunities for funding. And we do offer a lot of funding, some small, some much larger within the CTSC. So whether you're looking for funding, services, learning what kind of educational programs we have, please become a member. You will get emails, you'll get the newsletter, monthly newsletter that just came out yesterday. So please do that. It is free. It's open to everybody, whether you belong to one of the 7 partners or even if you don't, because we are including a lot of community members in this cycle of the CTSC. So please do so. And then we're all here. We have a resource navigator, Jerry, who just joined us, who will be more than happy to help anybody. So you can go on our website and look for navigator or research concierge. It could be under either one, and she'll be happy to help. So without further ado, I want to introduce the first speaker of this series. And it's not actually coincidence, because one of the areas that we specify in the application that we don't have much happening within the CTSC, but an area that we want to grow and research is integrative medicine. And Dr. Rao is a co-investigator on our CTSC. So I'll introduce Dr. Rao for you, and then you see why we have him as the lead for integrative medicine. So Dr. Rao is currently the medical director of the integrative oncology for Connor Hall Health. He's also a clinical associate professor for medical oncology and for GU oncology. He is a perfect, actually, person to speak on this, because I feel like he's very strong in traditional medicine as well as integrative. So somebody who can speak for the pros and cons of both of them. Dr. Rao also serves as the president for the Society of Integrative Oncology. He's board certified in both medical oncology as well as integrative medicine. He's passionate about this area, and I'm gonna ask him to start by giving us a little overview of what he means by integrative medicine, and then most of the time I like to keep it open for discussion or questions that you have. Again, the idea of this whole thing is to be informal, is not to give you slides for an hour, but rather to give you a quick overview and please ask you to discuss, try to learn, and ask any question you want. So Dr. Rao, thank you for allowing us to have you as the first Science Cafe speaker. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who's on. And I'm honored to be the first speaker, honored to be part of this team. So, my background, basically, this is a field, integrative medicine, that I've been interested in since college. And it was not really a field at that time. And so it's really evolved over time, where this is something that when I was in medical school, it was very difficult to speak about even. And slowly, you started seeing programs actually develop. I actually did my fellowship at CASE about 13 years ago and was quite involved with developing the program here even back then. And now it's evolved to a place where it's really becoming very mainstream, and there's guidelines and all sorts of other things that make it very practical. And so I'm going to just speak about this, give a broad overview. I am a medical oncologist in GU Oncology, as mentioned. I direct the program at UH Connor Whole Health and Integrative Oncology, and I'm the president of the Society for Integrative Oncology, where we work with people around the world. Let's see. So what is integrative medicine? Not easy to define this because it's a very broad umbrella. This is the definition from the Academic Consortium for Integrative Medicine and Health. And it says integrative medicine and health reaffirms the importance of the relationship between the practitioner and patient, focuses on the whole person, is informed by evidence, and makes use of all appropriate therapeutic and lifestyle approaches, healthcare professionals, and disciplines to achieve optimal health and healing. For me, as I've been in this field, it's not always easy because really many of us, and I would say all of us, have this goal in mind. And so, especially if you're in a clinical setting. So I think the things that make it unique is, first of all, you're really focusing on patient empowerment, patient-centered care. What are the things the patient can do for themselves? And then this aspect of all appropriate approaches. Integrative medicine includes exercise, lifestyle, but also cultural practices that are not always woven in to our conventional care. This is an evolving field, but I do think that that's unique. It's a unique field of literature and study. Use of integrative medicine is increasing. One study showed that in the US, 42% of people use integrative medicine. Very similar internationally, you'll see different rates. The WHO, multiple countries also have used guidelines and use of agencies to guide research. And the other thing is that it's not always disclosed from the patient to the provider what people are doing. And I think that's a really important aspect of this. We want things to be coordinated as best as possible and scientific. So on the right are some of the areas that make integrative medicine important, or are areas that we're talking about. I'm just going to show what my model is, just as an example, and I'm still building this model out, but basically in a practical setting, and I'm an oncologist, we're talking about different settings of cancer and how you can approach these things through complementary and lifestyle management. So I see patients in integrative oncology consults. We have stress management programs, which can be for anybody at any stage. And then we have these symptom management and lifestyle programs, as well as some inpatient programs that we're developing. And then it's an opportunity to link with other services because there's various different ways to manage some of these issues that patients have. We know the research is growing These are publications in integrative medicine up till 2021. And guidelines. So in oncology, there was an ASCO and Society for Integrative Oncology co-opted guideline on evidence-based approaches, non-pharmacologic to pain, which is obviously a central issue for all of us. And then it was followed up last year with another guideline on anxiety and depression. And the details are not so important, but the point is that this is done with ASCO. It's very evidence-based, and really, I think these things kind of coalesce the practice strategies. NCCN guidelines is what we use a lot in oncology. You can see how well represented integrative approaches are to different symptoms. And then the American Institute of Cancer Research put out these 10 goals for prevention of cancer. I will say a lot of these things people debate, even in the field of integrative medicine, and it just highlights how we really need to start getting more precise. For example, consumption of red and processed meat. That comes up a lot, but you know, there's a lot of nuance to some of these recommendations. You know, some of them are obvious and some maybe less so. So we did, I'm going to give you some examples of the kind of research that can be done. We did a research study at UH on music therapy for different symptoms and showed that just one music therapy session could reduce pain, anxiety, and fatigue. There's a study out of Sloan Kettering showing that massage and acupuncture were very similar for managing pain. And this kind of comparative effectiveness research, I think, is very important as we start, you know, really evolving this field. Very interested, as I'm sure many people are, in the microbiome. And then really, how does it impact health and also response to therapy? There's been some studies showing that if you have a low microbiome diversity, you can have a worse response to immunotherapy, which is very commonly used in oncology care. Probiotics also impacted that negatively. And then there's some interesting studies on fecal transplants in various different settings, whether it's obesity or even cancer treatment. So I find all of this fascinating. I'm sure we'll learn a lot more in the future. Sleep is another area that's really, really interesting. 2017, the Nobel Prize was given to these three scientists for their work on clock genes, which really impact a lot of areas in health, including immunity, obesity, and cancer risk. You know, an area that we really struggle with is natural products. And really, there's very little evidence for some of these things, looking at harm versus benefit. There's a JAM article showing that if you use complementary medicine in lieu of conventional therapy, you have less effect. But this is the kind of stuff that people are actually doing, and we have very little kind of precise information to recommend or not recommend. And these are things that are actively being discussed and studied. Another area that we just talked about is health equity, near and dear to my heart, and is really, I think, impacting integrative medicine as well. We know that now that the evidence is increasing, it's becoming a situation where, because it's fee-for-service, you could potentially get better care if you can afford, you know, to get complementary therapies, to get the lifestyle recommendations, to eat the healthy food. So that's widening this gap even more, and is important for us to find methods to close that gap, to work with insurance, to work with our institutions on how we can deliver resources and care to different populations. So some of the research areas that I just kind of started thinking about that are of interest in this field, I think definitely mind-body health, and areas that could be interesting are substance abuse, including tobacco, mood disorders. There's a lot of interest in psychedelics, stress management. In lifestyle, obviously obesity, lots of work being done there, but also in different populations. I mentioned the microbiome. And then managing symptoms of patients. What's the mechanism of action for natural products? How can cannabis be used for pain, as well as other integrative approaches? I have an interest in biofield therapies, which people know very little about, but even acupuncture. What's the mechanism of action of these things? How can we learn more about ourselves? I mentioned comparative effectiveness. A lot of the research in this area is on patient-reported outcomes. So that's central in having good data structures to coordinate this research. And then implementation, health equity. How do we use these things in different populations? What's the impact? I think it's being shown in diet, for example, that not all populations are the same. We really need to look at this very carefully. And then artificial intelligence as well. Some areas for collaboration I listed, again, for cardiology, substance abuse, lifestyle, oncology, lifestyle, microbiome, pain management. And then there's lots of coordinated activities we could do on obesity, metabolic approaches to reduce inflammation, which covers many different types of disease. And then when we talk about implementation as well. So I'm just going to highlight a couple things about the NCCIH. That's the institution, the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. That used to be NCAM. This has evolved over time. But they have a lot of different programs for integrative medicine. One is the NIH HEAL initiative for pain management. They have a focus, and this comes from their website. The things they want to focus on is mind-body therapies, including music therapy, health restoration. They have an interest in AI, nutrition, natural products, workforce development. And then they have this RAND Reach Center, which is research across complementary and integrative health institutions, really trying to spur on collaborative research between institutions. And like most research, I mean, this is what they highlight in terms of the areas that they could conduct research, basic science, all the way down to dissemination and implementation. Some of the funding opportunities, they're more than this, of course, but the NCCIH, NCI, and then the NIH and integrative medicine being such a broad umbrella, there are grants that may be available within NIH in different subspecialties. For example, looking at hypertension, heart disease, and maybe exercise or diet programs, etc. There are various foundations. I listed a few: Gateway, Rising Tide, and Osher. There are training opportunities as well that I've listed on the right. I want to highlight also that in Cleveland, we're hosting probably the biggest integrative medicine conference, or one of the biggest. There's an annual International Congress on Integrative Medicine and Health by the Academic Consortium on Integrative Medicine and Health, and we're the host this year. So if anybody has an interest, please pass this along. It's April 9th through 13th with the actual Congress from 11th through the 13th. And, I'm going to pause for questions, but I've had this very long-standing interest. I think that, for me, this is science. I think a lot of people look at these different modalities as placebo or something patients want. But I think the reality when I think about the future of medicine is that in some capacity we'll have improvements in technology, but in some capacity we'll have better knowledge of ourselves and how people, behave and act and what they're exposed to throughout their lives. And part of that is integrative medicine. And I think that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing and happy to answer some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Rao, for presenting. So if it is possible, it'd be great if people could turn on their cameras just to help facilitate discussion so we can all see each other. So I don't know if anyone has any general questions or comments for Dr. Rao to start off.
Hi.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Margie.
Okay, this is Margie Sanders from Neomed. And I just wondered, I didn't hear anything in your talk, but how is spirituality, like what gives meaning to people's lives, incorporated into integrative medicine?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it a lot. Obviously, again, I think if you're in the field of integrative medicine, they kind of try to own everything. But I mean, spirituality obviously is just like, beyond everything, right? And so I think, for example, I'll just give you my thoughts on this. We have an annual conference for SIO, and this year one of our plenary sessions is on spirituality. I think there are a lot of people in the field of integrative medicine, leaders in the field, whether it's Deepak Chopra. There's this whole group called the Consciousness Healing Initiative, where they work with basic scientists that are physicists, for example, and thought leaders on consciousness, on these areas that we don't often talk about in medicine. And I don't know where that will go. And these are obviously big questions in life. But when we think of spirituality in a clinical setting, a lot of it is just what you said: purpose in life, goals, having gratitude, all those kind of things. I think it's frankly very understudied. That's just my take on it. It's important, but I think, yeah, it's something I just know from my own medical education. We spent very little time, and I've had attendings who've even in front of me told patients they don't think it's important. So I think that first things first is this is something that's very important, but it's how we talk about it, and then there's a lot of work that needs to be done in research. There is some research, but it's difficult to kind of distill it down.
Thank you.
I think Jerry, you had a question?
I did. So if you were to give some suggestions to an early stage investigator who maybe wanted to get into this type of research with a community partner, do you have any kind of basic things they could start with?
Yeah, so let me ask you, what do you mean by a community partner?
Like maybe someone who has worked with the Cleveland Clinic on massage therapy, maybe has their own massage therapy business or something related in that way.
Yeah, I think that obviously a lot of it depends on the resources. But for example, at Connor, we do a lot with patient-reported outcomes. And I think that that's a good place to start, is just making sure that you're gathering data on everybody who's getting treated in a methodical way. And as long as you have some capacity to track that and some way to process it, which takes funding usually or research support, that's really the basic thing. And a lot of good things can come out of that. So for example, in pediatrics, we did massage therapy and for children. And somebody, Jeff Dusek, he just decided, look, we need to start gathering the PRO data. And that became a paper. And it really, there's so little research done in real world settings that was actually impactful. Just one massage therapist tracking her PRO data. So I think that that's where I would start. I think the other thing is that we should respect the fact that we have this diverse population and unique patient care setting. So, it depends on where you are, but there's all these community practices, and depending on your patient population, that just may add a lot to the evidence. So I think that's probably where I would start. And then, obviously, if you could partner that with funding and somebody who's a scientist, you might take it to the next level.
I do see that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask Santosh a question. And sorry, I had to step out to take a call. So if you covered that, it's fine. Do you feel like the uptake, take MD, the uptake in integrative medicine, in acceptance of them as a treatment, do you feel like that's improving over time?
Big time. It's crazy. I started my talk talking about this. I'm telling you, people used to make fun of me in medical school. Like I didn't know what I was talking about. Very frustrating. And I was a bit ahead of my time because we didn't have some of the studies they have now. But I stopped talking about really any of this, even stress management. And then 10 years ago, I remember giving a talk to my oncology colleagues, and somewhere sugar came up. And I just mentioned, I don't think my cancer patients should eat sugar all day. And I got attacked, not just by one, but all 14 of the people I was with, who are very well trained. And I see these things as a lot of ignorance. I actually don't understand why people don't get exposed to these things. Obviously, stress is important. Obviously, sugar is not good for a variety of reasons. It's odd to me because I think, if we want to be scientific, you shouldn't be so closed-minded. And you should really think about what you're saying. I think things have changed. I think that, many of some of it's just a younger group of physicians. I think that, society's evolved and people are doing yoga and people are eating plant-based diets, and they're just exposed a lot in social media and culture to a lot of these concepts, to the point where I think there's just this kind of, we've gotten over that hump. I don't see a lot of resistance at all. As a matter of fact, most of the leaders in our field or in our cancer center, for example, they want me to do more. And they themselves probably do these things, but there's really not a lot of resistance clinically. And even research-wise, I for a long time, I've seen that, most of the people doing research in this area are not, quote unquote, in our field. Everybody does this stuff. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. So you'll see, somebody who's doing GI oncology will also do some research on the microbiome. Or, somebody who's a breast oncologist will do some research on exercise. That's how this stuff goes. So I think it's such a broad umbrella. People are engaged in one way or another, which also makes it fun. I mean, you have a lot of different angles to study these things. But I think, I don't see a lot of resistance really. There's just a lot more need for precision. Now it's getting to the point where I could just say, hey, we're going to have a program. But, if you're telling somebody what to eat, there's so much detail that we don't understand. Some of the research is suggesting we should not be telling everybody to eat the same thing, whether it's the type of disease you have or your race has a big influence on this. And yet, I don't think that has trickled into what we actually recommend. So I feel like there's just a lot of need for now more research and precision.
Yeah, that's so interestingly. So, I do HIV research and recently COVID. And I'll give you an example how people see the vitamin word, right? So I have had and continue to have several grants looking at vitamin D, zinc, a lot of different supplements and vitamins in HIV. And it took a lot to convince even reviewers for NICCH, which is the institute that deals with integrative medicine. It took a lot of preliminary data to convince them that we do need to study it in a randomized controlled study. So vitamin D, for example, I was myself on the study section, and I heard what the study section said about one proposal studying vitamin D. I mean, basically, in short, it was like, are they crazy? It's vitamin. It's not going to do anything. It doesn't solve any problem. These are big researchers in HIV. So I was able to get data on vitamin D and the importance on cardiovascular disease in HIV, on inflammation, and then ended up getting a 5-year grant to study in a randomized placebo-controlled study, vitamin D supplement, and found it amazing results, actually. I mean, it really decreased inflammation. These are people who are very inflamed. They have HIV. It made really very impressive results. We published those and presented at a meeting. How much of the clinicians do you think took anything from that? None. Even my own site, if you look at the HIV clinic here, not to talk about my colleagues, but I'm probably the one to take the data we learned and put it into practice. So clinicians are still so skeptical, even after a very rigid NIH-funded randomized controlled study.
Well,
so
I think that the point of all of this is just, again, it's about science. And ultimately, it's about impacting people, okay? But for me, my understanding of science is just part of it is asking a question and methodically getting results. Obviously testing a hypothesis. And it's amazing how opinionated people are about all sorts of things that without investigating. That's the whole point. And what we realize is that people bring so many cultural biases, personal biases, just what you said. It's a vitamin. So what? It's like, there's so much out there that we don't understand. And at a time, it's really crazy. If you look at our healthcare system and how easily people pop pills, but they don't want to ask questions about meditation or vitamins, or it's silly. So I think I think for me, it's important to make that argument that, this is not unscientific. You're just actually looking at things and things that people are doing. So, you don't mind somebody going to Walmart and getting their vitamin D and somebody else doesn't. But those are variables. We should look at these things and get a sense of being, again, more precise with what works and doesn't work in different populations and settings.
I did see somebody put in the Q&A a question, and they had said, how do you capture qualitative data when working in your field?
Qualitative data?
Yes.
Like, you mean, I guess, for me, I think part of it is the patient-reported outcomes. And that's just a huge part of what we do. I think other types of data, whether it's blood tests or imaging, take more funding. There's lots of work being done, but I think we're really limited by the funding. For example, in India, they're doing research on biomarkers and yoga, but they're limited by the funding. And I think, that their whole government actually is behind this. So they have some resources, but this is the kind of research that we need. I think they're very well validated patient-reported outcomes. So those things are great, but they're subjective. And so, if you want information about mechanism, about objective data, that's the area we're really limited, I think, in my opinion.
I also see there's a question in the chat. I don't know if Susan wants to unmute, or I can read it as well.
What?
Oh, okay, I can read it. So Susan asks, are medical students being exposed to this area in a significant way?
They are. So, it's building, but medical students and obviously nurses and also residents in training. I know that there's a couple fellowships in oncology, one that is specific to people learning integrative medicine. There's an integrative medicine residency. But in our case, for example, there's a wellness pathway. So, and that's apparently the most popular one. And so, there's all these fourth-year students who learn about cooking and nutrition, some physical activity. I have gone to the medical school and I did an evening where I talked about integrative medicine. So I think they are. Could it be more? Yes, but I advocate that, medical school is really busy. And so it's very difficult. I think that, first things first, they have to learn about nutrition, the importance of physical activity, and just the impact of stress. I would think that's much more important than other areas of integrative medicine. How to prevent, obesity, how to, give lifestyle suggestions for high blood pressure. I think these low-hanging fruits, how to help manage anxiety and depression, those are the things that medical students need to learn. I think beyond that, we would want people to get exposed. We know that physicians who exercise and take care of themselves are much more likely to advocate for these things to their patients. And we know that physicians who talk to their patients about these things, their patients do it more often. So you can see the link that it's really important as a medical student to actually have exposure to yoga, to doing exercise, to eating healthy. And so that hasn't always been, I think, really emphasized before, but it's actually has a real impact. So those are the areas that I think many medical schools are working on. And things have changed. Now that medical students sleep, there's all these mindfulness programs for medical schools. Those are very popular, so we take care of our medical students much better than we used to. And they're exposed to a lot of these concepts. And that's also making the field evolve, because if your medical student is engaged in a spiritual practice, is exercising, is focusing on their sleep, they're going to see the benefit, and they're going to be talking to their patients about it 5 or 10 years from now.
So I don't know if anyone wants to share, why they're on the call today, if they have certain research, current research or areas of interest they'd like to move into that relate to integrative medicine.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm here not just because I'm the PI of the CTSC, as Santosh knows. This is like an area that's very dear to my heart. I mean, as much as I do research on HIV and a lot of biologic drugs that could kill people, they're so toxic. At the same time, I do a lot of vitamin D and K. I wrote a book on it, and a lot of even COVID research now. We published that vitamin D and K were preventive against bad outcome in COVID. So even after you adjust for everything else, the level of these two vitamins in people's blood when they get COVID were independently predictive of better outcome, regardless of age even. So I'm big proponent of these vitamins. Even my two kids every day, they remember by themselves, actually. They take vitamin D and K. So yeah, I love this area.
Let me answer. There's a question online. I see one. So Jaleese, am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So integrative medicine. So first of all, I mean, I don't want to speak for the whole field, okay, but I can certainly speak for integrative oncology as the president of SIO. First of all, just I think in terms of the population of people who are interested in this field, we're very diverse and really care about different groups and cultures. Our organization's international, so we're very sensitive, I would say, to isms, various isms. I think that when we talk about racism, for example, just as one, it is a public health crisis, and it goes beyond integrative medicine. I think when we talk about it in integrative medicine, it's more often to highlight what the gaps are. Like we often will have conferences and also look at research with the Native American population and how, very limited their healthcare is, and we engage with them. Integrative medicine also engages in cultural medicine and cultural, belief systems, and trying to incorporate that in their care to give people agency. And so that does incorporate kind of a more patient-centered approach. But I think that in terms of real research, yes, it's part of what we do. I'm concerned about the implementation, as I mentioned, of some of these modalities because they're not insurance-based often. They highlight the gap and increase the gap. And we have the same problems that any other health, group would, or, any other health offering would, is, having diversity, having equity and accessibility. Those are issues that face integrative medicine in practice and implementation. We talk about it a lot. I don't think anybody has a perfect solution. In my opinion, you need both partnerships with the institution, but you need some government partnership as well. So CASE is doing this. I work very closely with our community outreach partners. I would argue I haven't done anything yet, but we talk about it a lot. And how do we, engage folks who need probably more assistance with diet? And there's a lot of opportunity. So to me, this is always an area that's highly, highly important. But because of the way our healthcare is delivered, we have the same problems that anybody else does because of our healthcare system. And then, having some involvement with people around the world, it looks different in different places. So, that's kind of my best answer to it. I'm super passionate about this. I'm actually sit on the Health Equity Committee as part of this CTSC. But I don't think I have a solution per se, but I think it's a very important area of research. I'll say that. And also implementation research.
Thank you.
Yeah, Santosh, so you know that UH has, for any patient with food insecurity, right? They have that market, they provide food. Are you aware of any research embedded within this effort at UH? Because it would be so easy in a way to follow these people and get, any BMI trend, any of the PRO that you discussed, data. Is that happening?
I don't know. I don't actually know. I would be shocked if it isn't, because there is a clinic that they're doing for women's health. I'm just not involved in that. And I wanted to start a clinic, and I do want to start a clinic with an underserved population through Otis Moss. And certainly we would do research. But, I don't actually know. I'd be surprised. We have various leaders who are, leading that. And I'm sure they're doing research. I just don't know. I think, though, that this is the kind of stuff where, if in my mind, it's the most impactful, because if you can show that those dollars impact patient lives and all that kind of stuff, that creates an argument for support, which is ultimately what I think will happen. So to me, that's just really practical. And then, like I said before, there's a huge need for more precision and really understanding what different groups of people need, not only socially, but even biologically. I think that's important. And we have some of that, of course, but we know that enrollment by different minorities is less. And this is something that we have a strength in Cleveland because of our diverse population. So that's where a lot of other leaders that I work with around the country, they're very interested in partnering with CASE because we have a high African American population, for example. But not only that, we have a diverse population, both ethnically and in terms of financial status. So, my friend in LA, he is very interested in working with us because they have diversity, of course, but within our healthcare, kind of patient population, both Cleveland Clinic, UH, all these people, we just have a lot of opportunity, I think.
Yeah. So I think that's a good time to discuss the RFA for next year. So remember that we did mean actually that this is one area the CTSC would like to develop. So I just want to, anybody who's listening, interested in this area, just so you know, we are going to put an RFA from the CTSC for year 2. So in the next few months, to gather any research proposals that we can fund related to integrative medicine. So Dr. Rao is gonna lead that effort, and I'm sure some of what we discussed. And by the way, Santosh, there is nothing happening in the food insecurity thing, because I can tell you it's very disappointing. When I sent them like 20 patients, and I asked them, is anybody checking your food? Like when you select, are people even checking? Because to do research, right, you have to have an idea about what food they're choosing. And also anybody bringing you back for a weight or asking you about any follow-up, there's nothing. So I think that would be a good opportunity. If you want to change policy, as you said, also you have to, show that it works, it impacts people. So I think for all these reasons, that RFA would be interesting. And hopefully, we can increase the number of investigators within our partners who care and do integrative medicine work. So it's coming.
Well, I can't thank you all enough for engaging me in this this meeting and stuff. It's just great that we can talk about this stuff, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of opportunity, but I really I want to thank Dr. McComsey also for your support. And yeah, any last questions or?
No, I have to say I'm actually I'm really happy that you came to UH, because I think, as you know, I know I used to work with Jeff Dusak before, but there's not a lot of people who really have a passion, and not MDs. Like there's a lot of PhDs, it seems like, at least from my experience, but it's great to have somebody who understands kind of both sides. And cancer is one population that really needs any help they can get. So integrative medicine is even more important than cancer. So we're glad to have you at UH and within the CTSC.
Thank you.
So Mackenzie, you want to close it?
Yeah. So if no one has any other questions or comments, just a few things. And I think Shannon is going to put the links in the chat as well in case people are having issues with the QR codes. But if we look from left to right, so I just wanted to remind everyone that on the website, you can see it as well, but there will be no Science Cafe next month. But instead, we're encouraging people to register for the Women's Health Equity Unmeeting. So if you scan that QR code, it'll bring you straight to the registration for that. And the middle QR code, if people could take, 2 minutes to just give some feedback about how this session went. And there's also space in that form for you to suggest any future topics for the coming months for Science Cafe. And then the next Science Cafe will be on April 11th at 12 p.m. And that will feature artificial intelligence with Dr. David Kelber. And I have put my contact information there and then a link to the CTSC website. So thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate it and hope to see you in the coming months.
All right. Thank you.